Hi everyone, Kathy Rose here, and I'm going to talk to you about the astrological patterns for July 2025. So we begin with the Cancer mandala on screen because the sun is traveling through the sign Cancer, and it is supercharged by the fact that Jupiter is also in Cancer. Jupiter will stay in Cancer until summer of 2026. So right now, there's a lot of emotional energy in the background, focusing on nurturing and comforting and soothing. And I think that's quite beautiful. But there's more for July. Let's look at the themes. The biggest statement for July is neural synapse stimulation. Isn't that interesting? That's because we have Uranus entering Gemini this month, and it really will add a lot of electricity to our thinking, and that's why I chose the mandala that's on screen. I call that the Nova mandala. So imagine happening in your brain. Imagine that kind of activity, that kind of electrical activity going on. We'll talk about that more in a moment. And the other thing for July, which is very strong, is that there is a lot of opportunity here to connect with humility and confidence and to engage in a leadership style that focuses in that way. We're going to have opportunities to explore leadership energy, and in the background is a whole lot of humility and confidence wanting to merge together. So I'm going to explore that with you step by step as we go through the month and what's happening. So first, let's talk about the big news. Uranus entering Gemini on July 7th. So first of all, I want to remind you that Uranus has a lot of electricity, and the purpose, the function of the planet itself, the frequency of the planet is designed to create a wave of refreshing change. Uranus is the opposite of stagnation. So the electricity from that planet comes in and tends to create sparks that zaps away stagnation or stale energy. So again, the frame of reference I always use with this planet is that if you have a stale, stuffy room somewhere, Uranus would be the kind of energy that would open the windows and let fresh air flow in. And this is what's going to be happening in our mind as it enters Gemini, because Gemini is an intellectual air sign, thinking sign. So our thoughts, our beliefs, we get all of this sparkling electricity flowing through. Now, this is just going to be a preview of this energy. Uranus stays in Gemini only until November 7th, so it's 4 months. And then it will retrograde back into Taurus. It's still got to finish whatever it needs to teach us in the earthy, practical sign of Taurus. And then it'll stay in Taurus until April of 2026. So we have this initial preview energy. And during this initial preview, we have something spectacular with a mini trine aspect that is formed between Uranus and Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius, making sextiles to Saturn and Neptune. So, this delicious and beautiful and easy flowing aspect structure is there for a reason. We have this opportunity between now and November to really look at our thinking, the power of our thoughts, to come up with new ideas and to create new foundational beliefs, to understand that what we say and what we think manifests in life. And this needs to go to that next level. And then when it finally enters Gemini later in 26 and spends 7 years, we're going to have this accelerated wave of energy about this. So let's look at this mini grand trine now on a chart. And this is the chart for the full moon in Capricorn, which takes place July 10th, 4:37 p.m. So the lines that are in blue on this chart are showing you this little mini grand trine, the trine between Pluto and Uranus and Venus also at this time, making the sextiles to those two planets in Aries. You don't want to miss the opportunity that this is offering. You want to practice and practice and practice your creative thinking, your energizing of the reality that you want to have, the aligning of your thoughts so that it flows with what you want to manifest in life. You really want to be doing that as we go for the rest of this year. Okay, so but going back to this specific full moon in Capricorn, the sun opposite moon in Capricorn, that moon in Capricorn is going to be making a nice trine to Mars in Virgo. Mars is in Virgo for the entire month of July. And you see Mars sitting up there at the midheaven. And that makes a statement. This is set for Washington, D.C., and Uranus is sitting on the seventh house cusp, the descendant. When planets are in angles, this is very, very powerful. If you watched my June forecast video, I mentioned for the solstice that took place, the solstice chart, and I placed it on the screen set for Washington, D.C. And we had two very powerful outer planets on angles for that solstice chart. And I talked about it in that video that sort of highlighted that time frame for the United States for some big activity to be taking place. And I said I wanted to energize it positively, and I was really hoping it would be a ceasefire or some peace negotiations. And what happened was that bombs were dropped in Iran by the United States, and they've negotiated a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. It's a little sticky still. And so I am recording this at the end of June. I don't know if it will hold, but I certainly hope it will. But what I'm trying to say is that that solstice chart with planets on angles prevailed. And now we have this full moon in Capricorn for the United States with planets on angles. Um, and of course, I always want to focus positively. But a full moon chart is not as powerful as a solstice chart. It's a step down, but still. So let's dissect this. And first, let's look at Mars in Virgo. When Mars in Virgo is used well, for each one of us personally, we get to step into humility and service. There is no more beautiful service and humble energy than Mars in Virgo, used at the highest level. The shadow side of Mars in Virgo can be very uncomfortable because that's when it can become very critical and judgmental, and picky, and tight and detailed, and worry. A lot of worry can happen when Mars is in Virgo used on the shadow side. So choose how you're going to use this. I mentioned when I talked about the themes for July, and I said humility and confidence and leadership. Well, here's why. It's Mars and Virgo for one thing. That's the humility. The leadership is the fact that Mercury will be in Leo. And I'm going to show you in the next slide that it's going to go retrograde and spend longer than normal in that sign, getting us a chance to look at how we respond to different leadership styles and how we do leadership ourselves. So the combination of this is to use humility and confidence and leadership together. And what does that look like? We really can be bringing this into the earth plane right now. There's a big change happening with how leadership is perceived and projected. So this is a very, very powerful full moon. And I'm going to be really excited to see what wonderful things manifest. Let's talk about the Mercury retrograde. Begins on July 18th and ends the retrograde on August 11th. And the zone for activity is going to be between 4 degrees Leo and 15 degrees Leo. So now if you know your own chart, if you know how to look at your chart, just do a quick check to see if you have angles or natal planets between 4 and 15 degrees Leo. For Mercury retrogrades, I largely look at a conjunction. So I would only look at the sign Leo for this to see if you're going to be activated, if you're going to be receiving this Mercury retrograde to your own chart. I will be. It's going to be exactly hitting good portions of my chart. And I look forward to that. I never fear Mercury retrograde. I always know if I receive a Mercury retrograde, I tend to be extremely productive. Um, and that's what I stick to. Now, as it is retrograding in Leo, even if you do not have planets in Leo being impacted by Mercury retrograde, we all get the opportunity to review, that's one of the retrograde words, review leadership styles. Isn't that interesting as it's working with Mars in Virgo? So, one thing I would say to you is in the month of July and even in the month of August, spend some time reviewing how your parents modeled leadership, discipline, and leadership in your early life. What style of leadership did they model? Was it authoritarian, heavy disciplinarian? Was it critical? Was it effusive? Was it inspiring? Was it optimistic? What was their style of leadership? Was it permissive? Was it heavy-handed? How did you receive or experience the leadership from your parents? Because that makes an imprint. And then what did you do with that? Did you go on autopilot and adopt that same leadership style within yourself and project it out into the world? Or have you changed it? Have you gone extremely opposite because maybe your parents' leadership style felt really bad? Just explore this because this is what this Mercury retrograde in Leo really wants to work on psychologically for all of us. What leadership styles do you react to automatically? We have some world leaders, and I'm not going to be specific here, but we have world leaders, presidents, and otherwise, who have specific dramatic leadership styles. And there are a lot of people who react to particular styles being projected. So you need to ask yourself, what is that style? How do you react? And how do you want to do leadership instead? This is a powerful period we are in where new paradigms are being developed. What does leadership look like to you? And that advances us to another very potent period on July 24th when the new moon is in Leo. There's so much to say about this chart. Oh my goodness. So Mercury's retrograde. It has moved back to 13 degrees Leo, and the sun and moon will conjoin at 2 degrees Leo and will be exactly opposite Pluto. So you see that red line, that opposition between the sun and the moon and Pluto. Now, in addition to that, we have Mars and the South Node hooking up in Virgo. It will have been exact the day before, but it'll still be very strong on July 24th when this new moon takes place. So again, if Mars in Virgo or the South Node in Virgo with Mars is used in the shadow side, and there's always choice. The shadow of Virgo is the editorial eye that sees what's wrong instead of what's right. The editorial eye gone bad will see the mistake. Instead of what's going well, they'll see the bump in the road. And that can be overly critical. It can be tight. It can be judgmental. It can also be a whole lot of worry. Nobody worries better than the shadow side of Virgo. Maybe the shadow side of Cancer is in second place. So that would be the shadow side. Now, Mars and the South Node, a lot of traditional astrologers would say these are both malefics. I have released that designation and I just view them as energetic signatures because they can be used positively if you are mindful. So, this would be a great time to get in there and release worry, release judgment, and focus on humility, focus on service, and really develop it because it's still working with all that Leo energy, which is how do I radiate leadership? How do I lead? Whether it's with family members or children or your pets or people that you have at work, how do you do leadership? What do you post on social media? And how does that radiate leadership? Because you're affecting other people. It's a very interesting signature here. And I am very much energizing positivity with this. We also, though, you see the blue lines and the purple lines on here. So there's some very nice energy that flows because the sun and the moon in Leo will be trine Saturn and Neptune. That's a beautiful flow of energy. And we have that mini grand trine still going on. Well, not a grand trine, but a mini trine in purple between Uranus, Pluto, Saturn, Neptune. So again, you want to be in charge of your thinking right now. You want to use your leadership energy and your authority to decide what you are going to energize with your thinking. And again, I think a great mantra right now with Uranus in Gemini is to imprint into your psyche, I make great decisions. I think for the next 7 years, while Uranus is in Gemini, that is a mantra that needs to come in to your consciousness. I make great decisions as a declaration. Um, so this is a very, very powerful new moon in Leo. Understand you're going to have a choice point. Understand some things will be stirred up and you can move into empowerment. I mean, this is why the new moon is opposite Pluto. That's empowerment offered to release where you may judge yourself. That would be the Mars South Node conjunction. Where do you judge yourself? Where do you criticize yourself? Where do you criticize others? Where do you project judgment onto others? And to elevate that to the higher levels of Virgo, mixed with the higher levels of Leo, leadership that is inspirational, mixed with humility. Ooh, such a nice energy. All right, my final thoughts for the month of July. Since we are going to have that mini trine with air signs and fire signs so activated, I would say we need to balance that out with staying grounded. You know, the fire signs and air signs are in the masculine polarity. They are extroverted, they are outward, they are action oriented. And the air signs, particularly, are focused on the intellect. Um, so we need to balance a little bit with some of the feminine polarity signs, which would be water and earth, which are more inward, more introverted, but more grounding. So the picture that's on screen here is a beautiful moss heart that I saw on one of my hikes at a state park here in Virginia Beach. I was so delighted that my phone could capture the detail in the moss so well. And I was so grateful that I was guided to look at the ground at that very moment and see this moss heart that formed naturally. These are always signs for me that from the universe, from nature, from the nature spirits to remember the lovingness that exists. So find a way to stay grounded in love. Again, I think a wonderful, wonderful affirmation is I am love and I am attracting love. I radiate love and love comes to me. It's going to be very important as we go through this very dynamic period that we are in. All right. So, as always, much love and many blessings to you. And I look forward to seeing you in the August forecast video. Bye for now.